Prepare ourselves to hear the word here today, I'm going to actually ask you to open your hymnals to number 764. Because our gospel reading today is quoted quoted directly in that first verse, and so sometimes song helps work stuff deep in us and in our minds to remember going forward. So Sharon, if you'd lead us just in the first verse of number 764.
Good morning. Today's first lesson comes from the 15th chapter of Genesis, verses 1 through 6. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless. And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, You have given me no offspring, and so a slave born in my house is to be my heir. But the word of the Lord came to him, This man shall not be your heir. No one but your very own issue shall be your heir. He brought him outside and said, Look toward heaven and count the stars, if you are able to count them. Then he said to him, So shall your descendants be. And he believed the Lord, and the Lord reckoned it to him as righteous. Let us read together Psalm 33. Happy is the nation whose God is the Lord. Happy the people chosen to be God's heritage.
The Lord looks down from heaven and sees all humankind.
God sits firmly enthroned and watches all who dwell on the earth.
God fashions all their hearts and observes all their deeds.
A king is not saved by the size of the army, nor are warriors rescued by their great strength.
The horse gives vain hope for victory. Despite its great strength, it cannot save.
Truly your eye is upon those who fear you, O Lord, upon those who wait for your steadfast love.
To deliver their lives from death and to keep them alive in time of famine.
Our innermost being waits for you, O Lord, our helper and our shield.
Surely our heart rejoices in you, for in your holy name we put our trust.
Let your loving kindness, O Lord, be upon us, even as we place our hope in you. Our second reading comes from the 11th chapter of Hebrews, verses 1 through 3 and 8 through 16. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Indeed, by faith, our ancestors received approval. By faith, we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was made from things that were not visible. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to set out for a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he set out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he stayed for a time in the land he had been promised, as in a foreign land, living in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked forward to the city that has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith, he received power of procreation, even though he was too old, and Sarah herself was barren. because he considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one person, and this one as good as dead, descendants were born, as many as the stars of heaven, and as innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. All of these died in faith without having received the promises, but from a distance they saw and greeted them. They confessed that they were strangers and foreigners on the earth. For people who speak in this way make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of the land that they had left behind, they would have the opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God. Indeed, he has prepared a city for them. Here ends the reading.
The Holy Gospel is according to Luke, the 12th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Be dressed for action and have your lamps lit. Be like those who are waiting for their master to return from the wedding banquet, so that they may open the door for him as soon as he comes and knocks. Blessed are those slaves whom the master finds alert when he comes. Truly I tell you, he'll fasten his belt and have them sit down to eat, and he will come and serve them. If he comes during the middle of the night or near dawn and finds them so, blessed are those slaves. But know this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. You know, God sometimes delights us so that we can endure by what we see. Hebrews 11 speaks about faith here today in quite the delightful way, for it tells you of how faith is able to make an empty hand full. Now faith, this is Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Do you hear the contradiction in that? On one hand, you have words like assurance and conviction, and on the other hand, you have things that are hoped for and not seen. That is, they aren't there, but yet you have this assurance and conviction by faith because of them. Which is this way of starting to get at this idea that it's not just that by faith we hope for these things. That is, it's not just that faith believes that there are good things from God, but that in your belief, you have the assurance. In your belief, you possess the assurance. In fact, that word assurance was often used around property. So it was often used with things like when you were signing over a property to someone, giving them the assurance that it was going to be theirs, right? When you close on your house, it's your house. Even if it says, you can't even move in yet for 60 days, you know, after the closing, it's yours, and it's going to be yours. And so, even before you're holding the keys, you're already holding in your hand the house. That's faith. When your hand seems empty, faith actually says, by believing in Jesus, the blessings of Jesus are yours. You hold in your hand that assurance. And so faith becomes not just belief, but possession. And I think that's a delightful and beautiful way to think about faith. And the author of Hebrews, or maybe I should say the preacher of Hebrews, we generally tend to think Hebrews is probably a sermon, actually. He's preaching this delight into you for a reason. He's preaching to you about what faith is, so that you understand what it would be to not have faith. Hebrews is a sermon to Hebrew Christians, hence the name. And it's given to them because they seem especially, for some reason, ready to set it aside, set their Christian faith aside, and go back to Judaism. And so the author, the preacher, has been saying for some time how much that's an absurd thought, because in fact, so much of what Judaism finds its fullness, finds itself in Jesus Christ. In many and various ways, our ancestors spoke by the prophets, Hebrews 1:1. But in these last days, he's spoken to us by the Son. You see? How can you go back when it continues on and to fulfillment, to fullness in Jesus? And so this message of delight is given precisely to help getting them to hold on. So it comes to you in the face of when you're ready to let go. So it's not just speaking the beauty for the sake of the beauty. It's the beauty for the crisis. It's the beauty for the moments when faith starts to feel so routine, so drab, so inconvenient, that you think, what's the point? If we backed up to chapter 10, verse 32, it says, recall in former days when after you were enlightened, so this is after they've come to know Jesus, he says, you endured hard struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed to abuse and affliction, sometimes being partners with those who were treated. So sometimes you suffered with those who suffered. For you had compassion, he says, on prisoners, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property. You joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. Therefore, he says, this is verse 35, do not throw away your confidence, which is great reward. Why would you throw that aside? Well, the obvious reason, he says, is that they're sick of it. At one point, he says, you were happy to suffer, you were happy to sacrifice, you were happy to love. And I think in many ways, this same kind of wearing feeling can hit any Christian, no matter how mundane the reasons are that it hits you. It can hit you that you get sick of suffering, sacrificing, and loving. And so when he's going into the beauty, it's because he says, don't throw away your confidence. That the idea of all this is, I'm tired of faith governing my life in this way because of whatever reason. In fact, a lot of folks seem to think that Hebrews was written at the time of the siege in Jerusalem, where the Jews may be feeling this pull towards helping their people in Jerusalem go into fights for Judaism. Maybe it's something that's coming up in your life that starts to pull at you that says, so that in the midst of that pull, do you really want to add on top of it the way your faith directs your life? Or do you feel like a mime who's ready to quit? Because, right, a mime, if a mime, has some invisible force that's stopping them, right? Boxed in, I can't go nowhere. Sharon could walk from the organ bench right on over to the choir thing, but the mime tries and poof, hits the wall that nobody can see. But if the mime saw chocolate cake over there, might just be ready to say, I don't need to be a mime today. What is it? Because faith is an invisible force upon your own life too. What is it that makes you say, I don't need that invisible force upon me? But then here Hebrews come in and the preachers say, you got to know what a beautiful thing faith is then. You got to know that it's not just this force that's putting things upon your life, but it's putting into your empty hands the promise. It's putting into them what seems full, what would make them full, heavy with promise because of all the blessings of God that you would then have as your own, so that you're willing to go forward. And in fact, he says, this is in fact how all of our ancestors endured everything they endured, was by faith. This is verse 2 here today. By faith, our ancestors received approval. And so then he's going to go into this whole long line through the whole chapter of Hebrews 11, is this whole long line of going into this grand procession of Bible history, the sweep over all these stories and characters of the Bible, saying, you know what ties them all together? Faith. And the way by faith they endured. And the way by faith they possessed what they didn't possess. And so we skip some verses where he talks about Abel and Enoch and Noah from Genesis. And then he goes into Abraham, who's the main focus of the section we have here. And then after that, he'll keep going on. He'll talk about Jacob and Joseph and Moses. He'll start saying, there's so many people, I don't even have time to go. I'll talk about them all. I'm just going to start rattling them off like boom, 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 boom. So that you see that each one, they endured. And Abraham, who's our focus here, who we heard about in our first reading, especially our first reading really shows the beauty of Abraham as this prime example, not only as the father of the faith, but as one who's had to endure for a long time. Abraham was told to become an immigrant, to move to another country, to go there so that God would make a nation of him. And to do so, God said he'd make a huge family of his. And we heard in our first reading here today how Abraham sat there and said, where are all these kids you've been talking about? Right now, I have no heir, but a slave. And I'm supposed to have all these kids? But when Abraham sits there and his faith starts shaking to where he's ready to toss it aside, God actually doubles down on the promise to him and says, take a look at the stars at night. That's how many kids you're going to have. That's what your descendants, your family tree is going to start looking like. It's going to have to be written in the sky. And we'll never know just how profound a promise that is, because with the light pollution today, you'll never be able to see the night sky like Abraham did thousands of years ago. But even still, you can see how grand a promise that is. Because of the Earth's rotation, you can stand there at night and over time watch the sky change and more stars appear on the horizon like a never-ending promise, and see name after name. Because that's what Abraham was given. And Hebrews mentions that promise, that it would come to completion. Which means, of course, that there's a star for you and a star for me. because we're a part of that great promise. As Paul says in Galatians, we are, by faith, Abraham's offspring. It's one of the other delightful things that says that by faith, you're a part of the story too. By faith, you're a part of the procession. By faith, you can hold on. And so he says, look at them. None of them received it. They died before any of their promises came to fullness, but yet they endured. But yet, he says, they were able to see and greet them from far away. Like seeing the stars. You can move towards the stars, but you're never going to reach it by running down the road. But along the way, you can see it, and says that's what faith does. It lets you see that promise even when it's just far off, so that you know what you really have. It's the assurance. It's the hand that's empty, all of a sudden made full. So that you will hold on and not lay it aside. When I was in elementary school, I remember getting caught up in a song that we learned in music class there. It was based on an old spiritual, but it became very popular during the civil rights movement. And I think it's gone through many iterations and variations, because I couldn't even find the copy with the lyrics as I remember them from some of the verses. But it was called "Keep Your Eyes on the Prize, Hold On." And you can, and as you sing it, you can imagine why it would be so popular for folks who are still striving but don't have all their rights, but feel like they can see it coming and reaching them, that they would sit there and they would start singing, "Work all day, work all night, trying to gain our civil rights. Hold on, hold on." What are they telling you to do? Whatever you're suffering within it, however long it takes, we're just going to keep on going and not grow weary. We're just going to hold on, because after all, it's a long journey to rights and freedom for a lot of folks. And so that's what they were doing. And then here I was, this little elementary age white boy caught up in this song. And I just got captivated by it. You know, and that chorus that just goes, "Hold on." Of course, I was elementary age, so it's more like, "Hold on." "Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize." I mean, I won't lie, I remember like putting soul in it as this little boy. Like, "Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on." And here's the funniest part, or the craziest part about it. While I was doing that and letting loose, and I mean like letting loose, not just humming it to yourself, but singing it like when you blare the radio in your car on your own and you are just going to your Taylor Swift or Neil Diamond or whatever it is you go to in your car. But here it was, I wasn't alone, but I was in the car. I was with my mom and my brother, and the radio wasn't on. I was the radio. And there I was, just going, "Keep your eyes on the prize, hold on." And I just put that song on repeat over and over again and wouldn't let it go. No matter what, I would just go right on back. "Work all day, work all night, trying to gain our civil rights, hold on, hold on." And while I was holding on, my brother was getting sick. He was sitting there saying, "Shut up, Niall." And Mama would say, "We don't talk like that." So I just keep on holding on. Hold on, hold on. Well, you know, at some point when you're sitting there keeping your eyes on the prize, I don't know how many times through we were, my mom, whose spiritual gift was patience, her spiritual gift was running thin. And even Mom said, "Niall, that's enough." But what was she going to do to stop me? I was there in the passenger seat and she was driving the car. So I just kept on going. Hold on, hold on. That's what Hebrews, you see, is doing. It starts sitting there saying, there's this long procession, And all sorts of people have jumped on in it, and you ought to jump on in it too, because faith is the thing that's going to make you hold on. Do you remember Abel? Abel came right after the story of sin. First person to show up on the scene after sin shows up on the scene is Abel. And yet, though Abel's stuck in a world of sin and a world of hurt where the wrong seems off so strong, Abel was able to make an offering to God that was acceptable. Now, how in a world of sin can our offering ever seem acceptable to God? By one thing and one thing only, by faith. And so, faith is what lets somebody in a world of sin hold on, hold on. And then there's Enoch. And Enoch is one of those guys who sits there. He doesn't get a full story. He gets like 2 verses. It tells you how old he was, and then it says he walked with God and he was no more. And it's a really strange thing, but a lot of time has been spent in people of faith thinking about Enoch. Why does it not say about when he died? Because sometimes what gets us is not the sin, it's the death that comes with it, right? It's the way we got to strive to keep on living that starts to overwhelm our life. It's sometimes getting older that just makes living getting harder. And therefore with that comes living by faith getting harder. But Enoch walked with God and he was no more. He didn't die. How is it that he was able to just be taken up by God and live? Well, the same way you will. Because do you know what faith does? It places in your hand the blessings of Jesus, the promise, life. And so when you are overwhelmed by death, faith says, hold on, hold on. And then, of course, he goes on into Noah. And y'all remember Noah. It must have been a hard time for Noah. Some of those days where the skies were clear, but he was supposed to keep building that ark. You know what I'm talking about? And I'm sure he had other things to do those days where he would have happily thought about hanging up his ark building tools to go on tending to the field or whatever else Noah had to tend to. Well, same thing sometimes happens in our life where it's everything else that's weighing on it that makes us sit there and say, I don't really have time to be obedient. But Noah was saved by the flood, but he wasn't saved by his obedience. He was saved by faith, because faith is what saved him, and faith is what will save you. And so faith is the thing that tells us when we're ready to stop being obedient. It's what makes us obedient, and it's what saves us. Faith is what tells us to hold on. And so one after another, it's like work all day, work all night, going to gain our civil rights. Now at this point, some brother of the congregation is probably sitting there saying, shut up! But you know what? The preacher says, you know what, Mama says, we don't talk like that here. So we keep on and we go to Abraham. And here's the thing about Abraham. Abraham, isn't he that perfect example where you just sit there and say, I'm ready to let it all go because it's long, it's the weariness, it's the attrition that's getting to me, that once upon a time it was great, but now the shine seemed to wear off. Well, then guess what? God doubles down on his promise to Abraham, and he doubles down on his promise by writing you into that promise and putting your name on it. And you know how he does it? He does it by faith. So that just like Abraham, when you are ready to let it all go, you would hold on, hold on. And they were all sitting there, one after another, it says there, ready to give it all up. But all of them, one after another, they just kept on going. And the beat just kept on making its way. And more just kept joining on in. And you know why? Because they could see it. They could see it. They could hear it. They could feel it in their being. As though it was far off, but it had already come far closer. And it comes close to you too by faith. That's what it is to keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. And now we got to talk about Hebrews 12, because you can't talk about Hebrews 11 without talking about the start of Hebrews 12, because you know what? It really especially comes and reaches us. If it seems so far off, it comes a lot closer when he comes to you, and he's going to come to you again. And so Hebrews 12 begins by saying, you know what? You can join in this procession too. Therefore, it says, since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight, everything that's weighing us down and making us be ready to give it up. It says, don't do that. And the sin which clings so closely, the sin that says, I don't need faith, Don't listen to that. It says, and let us run with perseverance the race that's set before us. So that even if Father Abraham or Mama in the car said, that's enough, you would say, no, that's not enough. I'm going to keep on singing. I'm going to persevere in this. I'm going to hold on. And you know how it tells you to do that? By telling you to keep your eyes on the prize. It says, keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. The cross. What kind of joy is that? I had a pastor friend who asked me that once. He'd like to focus on that. What kind of joy is a cross? And you know what he said? He said it couldn't be heaven. He never had to leave heaven if that's the joy that was before him. It couldn't be eternal life. He is the resurrection and the life. He didn't need to go attain it. The joy that comes from the cross is giving it. Giving that song, Beulah land that you want to hope for. Giving it to you so that you have it too. Oh yes. This is what faith is. When you can't see it. When you can't hear it. You can see it. You can still hear it. You can still feel it within you. You know what the future holds. And you can hold on. Amen.
Amen.